Hello and welcome to the Schola Progenium. Today I'm going to be talking you through some 750 point lists. Now I've got 7 lists lined up for you. I've got some cheesy lists, I've got some fun lists, I've got a bit of everything in store. Now why would you want to play at 750 points? Well, if you're just starting out, 750 points can be a really good level to aim for, because even if you've got around 1,000 points worth of models, you don't necessarily want to use all the models in your collection when you're playing a battle, because your list will be sub-optimized and you won't be trying out tactics as efficiently as you could do. Whereas you can sort of leave a few models behind at 750 points and really tailor your list and to try out specific tactics and really learn your craft. So it's a really good way to learn your craft. As a more experienced player, 750 point list can be really fun if you're playing those battles, and for a variety of reasons. Say you've had a big game and it's finished quicker than you were expecting, maybe one of you steamrolled the others or something like that, or you're playing a longer sort of couple of battles in a day and a battle takes longer than you thought and you won't have time for a second battle. You can just crack out a 750 point list and it's still got a bit of everything. You can still have a couple of different elements to your army and still have real fun and have a good decent game, and it'll only last an hour or so. Otherwise you can just sort of have a day with your mates where you all bring a couple of 750 point lists, and it just means that no one's waiting around if one battle finishes quicker than another and you want to swap opponents, because the games are over pretty quick, and you can take a variety of elements, as I've said, of your army, so your army does feel really thematic or whatever. You can do a lot of things with your army. You've got the points to play around, but the battles are still quick. So, and there's loads of other reasons why you would want to play 750 points, but, all in all, it's just all about having fun. So, without much further ado, let's get into these lists. And for each list, I'll describe the units and, of course, then some specific tactics that you want to use to win with that list on the battlefield. So this first list is a really nasty list. It's one of my favourites for kicking ass on the battlefield, and I've been using it a lot recently. Played a few games with it over the last couple of weekends. Now it's comprised of effectively 3 characters, 2 characters and an Eversor assassin. I've got a lieutenant there. He's got a mastercrafted bolter and a power sword, and he sits with 3 units of 5 tac marines, and they've all got bolters, of course, and nothing else. And then I've got 12 death company, and they've got 2 thunderhammers and 4 power swords, and they've all got jetpacks. Now this unit works. Oh, and of course I've got my captain. Now my captain has a thunderhammer and a jetpack, but he doesn't have a storm shield, because I'm just going for that 4-up infant. Usually it'll die to Daka, and the difference between a 4-up and a 3-up doesn't seem to make a massive difference. Now what I'm going to do in terms of command points, I'm going to start off with 8 command points, but I'm going to be spending 2 straight away to take an Eversor assassin as the stratagem that allows you to take an Eversor assassin with an Imperial army. I'm also going to be spending another command point. This guy's going to be my warlord, and I'm going to give him the Black Rage on a 5-up feel no pain using the warlord and a 1-point command point stratagem. So this guy has a 5-up feel no pain, 4-up invuln, he's got an extra attack on the charge, he's absolutely nasty. Now this guy and this guy are just going to deploy on the battlefield, and you're just going to probably sit in a bit of terrain or cover if you can fit all your guys with bolters in cover. Or you might, you want to try and avoid spending 2 command points to put everyone in cover at the beginning of the game. But you can do that if you're desperate, but you shouldn't have to do that. You should try and get as many of these guys in cover as possible and just set up a nice little fire base. Now this guy with his power sword is really useful, because at 750 points, if someone tries to come in and take on your fire base, if you're Blood Angels, you've got all these tactical marines, they've got +1 to wound, and they can just mob a unit that's coming in on your fire base. And then you've got your lieutenant hitting on 2s with his attacks, with a power sword, and he's got +1 to wound as well, so he's going to be hacking apart stuff as well. So they can really look after themselves. Then you've got your Eversor assassin, and what you're going to do is, as the game proceeds in the second turn, you're going to jump this guy forward potentially, and get him in position to support the death company, giving them reroll 1s to hit. Because you haven't got a chaplain in this list, and death company really love those rerolls. You really want those rerolls. Then you're going to bring your Eversor assassin in alongside the death company, or you've got a variety of options. You can bring him in wherever you want, but he's going to come in at the same time as the death company. Now he can do a 3d6 charge when he comes in, so he's almost definitely going to get in. And you're going to spend another 2 command points on your death company to make them have 3d6 charge. And that way you're going to spend a couple of command points, but you're going to charge in with 2 nasty units, the Eversor assassin and the death company. The Death Company can easily kill a couple of units just in one charge. And then if you've got a few command points left, you can strike again with this guy, with his assassin stratagem, which I think is called Stim Overload, which lets him strike again. He has to roll a dice to see if he gets a 4-up wound, I feel. I think he might take a mortal wound if he does that potentially. And you can also spend command points. If you've got the command points, you'll run out of command points in your second turn, but to get these Death Company to strike again as well if you need to. And that can potentially table an opponent in your turn 2, because this guy can clear out a unit like 10 men, because he's got his pistol, which is 4 shots, AP -1. And then you've got your Death Company, which can easily declare a charge against everything within 12 inches if your opponent's bunched up. They can clear up a couple of units with their first round of combat, clear up a couple of units with their second round of combat. They can take on armoured units, they can take on anything you want. And remember, you've got your Thunderhammer Captain, and he is a formidable opponent on his own, and he can come in as a second wave and just finish stuff off. He can smash up tanks, he can finish off a knight. If they took a knight at 750 points, they're going to super cheesy. This can easily take on a knight, this list, and clear up the sort of few units that they have screening that knight with your Daka, because remember, you've got your bolter rule, and you've got reroll 1s to hit with the captain when you first deploy, because he'll be with these guys, and you've got reroll 1s to wound. So you're spraying out a load of Daka, and then you're moving the captain forward, and you're getting your Death Company and your Eviscer Assassin and your captain in the second and third rounds, just tidying up the opponent and just destroying them, wiping them out. This is an absolutely brutal list and a great list to start off. And this is a cheap list to collect as well. This is less than 2 boxes of Tactical Marines, so you could pick up a box of Tac Marines and another few cheaply online or second hand or something like that, or just buy a couple of boxes of Tac Marines, 3 boxes of Death Company, and then you'll have everything to convert. This isn't a converted captain from a Death Company, but you can easily do that. So you'll have 2 Thunderhammers, 3rd Thunderhammer to make a captain. You can use one of your spare Tactical Marines to make a lieutenant, like this guy. That's what I did. This is an old Tac Marine. And then you can use another Tac Marine or Death Company spare model to make your Eviscer Assassin. So you can easily build this for, you know, just over £100, give or take, because the Death Company are relatively cheap. They're around £22 each for a box, so that's under 50 quid for those guys. And then it's again around 50 to 60 quid for these guys, whether you can buy them first hand or where you get hold of them. So this could easily be a list you could collect for under £100, and it is absolutely brutal. Anyway, on with the second list. Now, I know what some of you out there are thinking, but Schola Progenium, I like my elite units to be shiny and gold and have nipples on their armour. So do not fear. Here is a list that is very similar to the first list, but instead comprises of 8 Sanguinary Guard as the murder unit that drops in. Now, another couple of things just to say about these lists. First of all, this guy, just to mention the sort of converting thing in a bit more detail, this guy's essentially a Assault Marine, but you could do this with a Tactical Marine or a Death Company Marine. I've got a couple of arms just from my bit box on there, giving him a pistol, some lightning claws just from my bit box. You could easily convert this guy. I've got a full video on this guy. If you haven't already watched it, check it out. But this guy's an Eviscer Assassin, so that's I think £19 new off Games Workshop. I just converted him up out of a few bits from my bit box, and you could easily do the same. And that's, you know, a great investment, and he works beautifully, especially at 750 points. He works just like a Blood Angels character, and he can murder stuff. And then the other thing I should just say about this is it has great board control as well. Your Tactical Marines can run around, your Lieutenant can run around, they can handle themselves if they get into trouble. They don't necessarily have to be in cover all the time, especially once you've mashed up the opponent's forces with your drop in and turn 2, even if you haven't wiped them out, because they're a pretty tough army. You know, once you've dealt a heavy blow to them, these guys are generally relatively safe because they'll be focusing on your elite units and your characters trying to get them dead. So these guys can sort of run out of cover, take objectives, that kind of thing. So it's a really mobile, flexible list as well, if it has to be. Now the Sandguard here, you've got more wounds with the Sandguard because you've got 8 models there, 2 wounds each, that's 16 wounds, so it's 4 more than the Death Company. And they have a 2-up save, which is way, way better than the 6-up Feel No Pain that the Death Company have. So they are a lot more resilient. But they are susceptible to the enemy's anti-tank fire. The benefit of the first list is that if the opponent has like multi-damage weapons, like las cannons or dart lances, stuff like that, blasters, all these kinds of things, it's not really that effective apart from against your characters, which can easily be shielded from fire. even when they're in the thick of it. But with this list, those shots are, much more dangerous because they can take down your 2 wound models much more easily, and that means that in many ways this list isn't actually as survivable as the Death Company list, because the Death Company are pretty good at surviving Daka, especially if they get into cover, and these guys, they're really good at surviving Daka as well, but you've got fewer models, so that anti-tank weaponry is going to sort of pay a heavy price for having the more elites. But they do have D3 damage each, and they're all AP -3 or AP -2. I've got 2 axes in there and 6 and Carmine swords. But yeah, it's a really nasty elite unit. It can chop stuff apart, it can chop tanks apart, most vehicles, it can assassinate characters, it can just wipe out whole flanks of the opponent force when it drops in, and because I've got the jetpacks again, it can use the 3d6 charge when it drops in, and all the other tactics with the Eversur, Captain and the Tactical Marines still apply from the first list. So yeah, nice list using the Sanguinary Guard, and again, a very cheap list to collect. 2 boxes of Sanguinary Guard, 2 boxes of Tactical Marines, and you can have yourself this list, because Sanguinary Guard converts really nicely into a jump pack captain if you wanted to do that. You'd have to get a Thunderhammer from somewhere, but I'm sure that wouldn't be a problem. Okay, on to the next list. Now this list is what you could say is a little more balanced. Now if you bought the Start Collecting box set, you'll have a Predator chassis there, a Bile Predator, but that can also be used as a Razorback, especially if you've magnetized the sponsons, which I highly recommend, and I went into that in my 500 point lists video, which I highly recommend you watching if you haven't already. So you've got your Predator chassis there, and that's got just a couple of assault cannons on it, and it can transport up to 6 infantry, so it can fit a squad of 5 TAC Marines in, and a character, or some remnants of TAC Marine squads if you've taken a beating. Now you've also got a less of an attack element here, less of an assault element. You've not got your Eversur Assassin, but instead you've got 5 Sanguinary Guard. I've got 2 axes on them and 3 and Carmine swords. Now in terms of characters, we've actually got 3 characters here. Now we're still bringing a battalion, but we're not spending the command points on the Eversur Assassin, but we've still got our captain with Thunderhammer, and then we've got another captain, again built from TAC Marine parts, and he's just been given a little base made out of cork and then painted grey and dry brushed, a little bit of moss on there. He makes a nice captain, and again that's nice and cheap, and he's got a shoulder pad from the Sanguinary Guard box set, which just makes him look fancy. And then we've got our custom built, was a TAC Marine but promoted to Lieutenant, and he's got a 30k bolter, just looks master crafted. Both these characters have power swords and master crafted bolters, and these guys are just going to sit in a firebase with these 3 squads in cover. None of them are going to be in the transport, and you'll have the transport sat with that firebase as well. And then this guy and the Sang Guard will potentially be in the sky, or this guy could be sat with your units ready to jump forward and then strike, depending on what type of army you're facing. If you're facing an assault army, this guy can start on the field because they're coming towards you, and it means you can get a decent charge off with this guy, and then drop in and do the 3d6 with this guy. If you drop both units in at the same time simultaneously, only one with the jetpack will be able to do a 3d6 charge with the stratagem, so that is a disadvantage to this list. Or not a disadvantage, but you've not got as big an assault coming in with that 3d6 charge. Now this unit, also, it's not amazing against armour, but you are kind of relying on it to make a dent in armour, because one twin assault cannon is not going to make much of a dent in armour. Neither of these guys are just going to be dackering away. Now you've got a really good anti-infantry, anti-horde capability with that assault cannon, and the 3 TAC Marines with a lieutenant and a captain supporting them full time, so they're always getting reroll ones to hit, reroll ones to wound. And these guys are really tough as well, because they've got these 2 characters with power swords, and the 15 of them themselves. They can really look after themselves in combat if your firebase gets assaulted. Now it's a really good list, it's solid, it's well rounded, but the assault is not as powerful, and you are going to be playing more for board control. You're going to be hanging back a bit more potentially, but don't be afraid later in the game to hop a unit or remnant into that Razorback and drive somewhere else and redeploy. So if you're holding one objective, holding it down, there's another objective midfield, you can fight the battle, not necessarily try to hold that objective, just target the enemy units, and then in the later turns, maybe turn 3, 4, 5, or turn 4 or 5 for sure, you can hop a unit of TAC Marines or just some shreds of TAC Marines into your Razorback and drive it towards an objective and then hop back out again, and you've taken 2 objectives. And the Razorback often is still alive, because you've got that captain and you've got those Sanguinary Guard, and they're going to be absorbing the heavy fire a lot of the time from your opponent's forces. So unless they go first and smash your Razorback with a couple of rounds of shooting before your Sand Guard come in, you'll probably be okay. Now, so that's a good list, but I don't think it's as nasty as the other lists. But again, it makes use of the Start Collecting box set. It's really cheap because you only need an extra unit Attack Marines, an extra box of Attack Marines, an extra box of Sanguinary Guard, and you've got your Start Collecting box set, and you'll have models left over, as I've said at the beginning of the video. But it's a nice rounded list. Okay, on to the next list. So this list is a nasty little list. It's nicely rounded, it has a really nice assault element, but the backlines are resilient enough, but not resilient enough to take a focused amount of fire or a focused assault in itself, in its own right. Now what you've got here is you've got 8 Death Company with 2 Thunderhammers and 2 Power Swords. Now that is a sub-optimum Death Company unit. And you've also got 4 Sanguinary Guards. So you've got a bit of both, you've got a bit of everything, which is a nice fun element to this list. Because, you know, it's fun to use a bit of all of your models, and if you've bought a few Sand Guard and a few Death Company, why not use both units on the battlefield? You've also got your Razorback there, and it's got 5 Tactical Marines. Now in this Tactical Marine unit, these guys are going to have to do a bit more work themselves. So I've got a Plasma Weapon in there, and the Sergeant, he has a Power Axe. So that's 94 points for that unit, but it can charge out of the Razorback if it sits in the Razorback, and it can Plasma something, Dacker it down, and then charge in and hack it up, and you've got +1 to wound. And the Sergeant's got the Power Axe. He's wounding anything on 2s, any enemy infantry on 2s, even if they're toughness 4, because it'll go down to 3 with the Power Axe because of the extra strength. And then obviously Blood Angels makes it +1 to wound. So he's going to be doing some serious work against any enemy infantry. They've got their little Dacker transport. They can either start off outside the transport or in it. And of course you will have to start with a couple more models on the field here, potentially the Death Company unit hidden and out of line of sight. And you can spend 2 command points to jump them forward at the end of the deployment just before the first turn. If you get the first turn, you can jump them forward 12 inches automatically, and then you can move 12 inches in their movement phase and be 24 inches across the board. And that allows you to have under 375 points off the field, because remember, you can only have half your army in Deep Strike. Now, this army, it is a little bitty, and you can be at risk of feeding your army to your opponent in bite-sized chunks. You've got the Captain and Sanguinary Ancient. Now, if your Captain's your Warlord, Sanguinary Guard, because of Heirs of Asgalan, they always re-roll hits when they're in 6 inches of the Warlord. So these guys will be doing serious work if they're working with him. And the Sanguinary Ancient gives re-roll 1s to wound in close combat. So if you can get the 2 characters forward, and you can get your close combat elements in, then you're going to get loads of re-rolls. You're going to have some really good sort of character assassination unit here. These guys, the Death Company unit, can take on reasonably any unit and wipe out 1 unit with a good round of combat, especially if they're getting rerolls off the Captain. You've just got to play this list carefully. You've got to make sure you're getting your buffs off, make sure you're timing your charges right, because otherwise you will end up just having the backlines picked off by one element of your opponent's army, and your assault units coming in dribs and drabs, because they can't all have the 3d6 charge at the same time, because that's a stratagem. So you will, potentially feed your army in dribs and drabs and end up getting chopped up and killed and shot up in bits and pieces. So you've got to be really careful, play to terrain, deep striking carefully, judge your timing right, but reasonably, especially with the manoeuvrability of the Attack Marines in that little Razorback, and the fact that your opponent will be focused on all these assault elements that can jump around, really manoeuvrable. You've still got your Captain in there, he's still got his 4-up invuln. I think in this list he actually has a Storm Shield as well, so he's got a 3-up invuln, a 5-up Feel No Pain, he's got 5 attacks on the charge, he's got that Thunderhammer, and he'll be re-rolling 1s to wound as well with the Sanguinary Ancient, so you can really tear the opponent apart, but this takes a little more careful play. It's like a mini Blood Angels list. It's got a bit of everything, and a bit of everything at 750 points can be a disadvantage, but it can also, it's a really fun, nice list. It's good looking, it's got your characters, it's got your Sanguinary Guard, it's got your Death Company, it's got some assault cannons. It's a really Blood Angel-y list. And one final thing I'll mention about this list, I forgot to say, it's actually got 6 men, so that Razorback is full, and that extra Attack Marine just keeps your guys on the field that little bit longer, especially if these guys are in cover. you're going to get turp save, and if you've got them sat in the Razorback at the beginning of the game, just to keep them safe, if they blow the Razorback up the opponent, you can hop out into cover and you'll be on a turp save. It's really hard to get rid of you before your deep strikers come in. And if you've got those Death Company hidden away as well, then you've got a good presence on the board. And remember, the Death Company can fly forward with their special stratagem, and the Sandguard can deep strike in, and then you can use the 3d6 charge with the Sandguard and get these guys just in the enemy's face anyway, just with movement and the jump forward at the beginning of the game. So you can really like sort of strike all at once, and that's how you get those two units to work together. But it does risk your Death Company. This is a more risky list to use, but if played right, if played correctly, if you hop the Death Company from cover to cover and you can keep them, hidden from the worst of the enemy firepower in the first round, if they go first, then you're good to go, and you will hack the opponent apart, and you've got really good flexibility, and it allows you to practice with this list, combining assault units together and combining your characters together, and it's a really good list to learn the art of a Blood Angel's assault in a smaller, more manageable form. One more thing I would say about this list is, of course, that in terms of purchasing models, the Sanguinary Guard with the Ancient, because you can take 4 models as a minimum in a unit, means you can get all this with the character for just, well, he's not a proper character, he's an elite unit technically, and this makes it a Vanguard detachment. So you're only actually getting 4 command points for this, and you're going to burn basically all of those with your 3d6 charge and you jump forward with the Death Company. So you're going to have very few command points to play with, or essentially no command points for rerolls and that kind of thing with this list. So again, that makes it again more difficult to play with. But it is essentially a cheap list to buy, and it's units that you're going to have. If you just have a Start Collecting box set, you're going to have the Razorback, you're going to have the Tat Marines, you're going to have and then the Sanguinary Ancient and Death Company, a couple of boxes of Death Company and a box of Sanguinary Guard. They're essential in a Death Company collection. You're going to want to buy those, and they're good first purchases as well. And it means you can just get a few units on the battlefield straight away and start fighting and start winning some games and practicing some tactics. So this list is for all you tread heads out there. If you've got a few tanks out there, maybe you're an experienced player, you've got loads of models in your collection, and then you won't have a problem getting together 3 Predator chassis with assault cannons. Now this is a beautifully symmetrical list. It looks great on when you set it up on the battlefield. It isn't as effective as I would like it to be, because you essentially have a lot of armour but no real anti-armour. Now in terms of characters, you've got a lieutenant, and you've got a captain, jump captain with Thunderhammer standard as usual. Now you've got 3 units of 5 Tat Marines, and in this list each one comes with a plasma. Now these units can start off as a castle with no one actually in their Razorbacks, and that gives you loads and loads. It gives you 12 bolters, which you could rapid fire for loads of shots. You've got 3 plasma there to take start plinking away at armor, and if you want to overcharge it, you've got your captain there. Then you can have the 3 Razorbacks all within 6 inches of the captain and the lieutenant, and you're spraying out 36 strength 6 AP -1 shots, and if you don't move, you're hitting on 3, so you are going to be absolutely spraying out the Dakka. Now against an opponent's list, if they've got a really tough unit, like if they have a knight in there, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, because he can take down a couple of these chassis a turn. He's just going to tear you apart, and you've not even got enough units on the board to sort of spread out and just take the objectives. You're just going to be cleaned up. And against really fast lists with lots of anti-armor or lots of elite units that can take on armor, you're going to struggle to avoid them. You're going to be moving around a lot with this list, so a lot of the time you are going to be hitting on 4s. So what you'll probably start off doing is castle up with this list, have the infantry out of the predators. You'll start off spraying down your opponent. You might start off with them in if you have to move up into position to set up your castle if they're going to be a defensive line. But then what you're going to do is you're going to spray at your opponent's forces and start trimming the fat, getting rid of as many models as possible so you have as much board control as possible. So you're turning the tide of the game in terms of models. You need to have more models and more manoeuvrability than them with this list, because you really can't take on the tougher units in the game with this list. The assault cannons, even with all this Dakka, it just never seems to get through the very tough units, whether that's assault or heavy armour. And if they've got decent heavy armour and anti-tank, over the course of the game they're just going to pick off these Predator chassis, these Razorbacks with assault cannons one at a time, and that's going to really sort of dilute your forces, take away your manoeuvrability and your DACA. So you're really relying on these transports, but these transports can't really defend themselves against units that are good at targeting them. And that really takes the wind out of this list sales, but it can be played correctly and it can absolutely tear armies apart. If one, your regular opponent uses orcs or something like that, then this list is going to be really nice against him, as you can probably imagine. But you don't want to be tailoring your list. This is more just one of those lists that's fun. It's got a few tactics. You can have it looks like a really nice little patrol detachment. You can really imagine this being a combination of forces that the Blood Angels would send out into a war zone to try and locate enemy forces. So it's a really fluffy list. It looks beautiful. It brings the DACA. And if you know what you're doing and you practice with this list, or if you know what you're doing with your tanks and your transports, and you're careful, then this list can really give your opponent trouble and win some games, because you can get all around the board. You've got plenty of firepower, and your captain, when you time it right, can run forward and smash a key enemy unit, potentially one that's going to finish off your bars to keep you in the game. So it's survivable, but not survivable as it looks. It's got firepower, but it can't really take on the top echelons of tougher units. And it's got a little bit of assault, but really not that much. These guys may need to get in the thick of it, jump out of their transports and assault units. You need to sort of be picking off units, jumping in and out of your transports, jumping out, spraying, assaulting. Next turn, jumping back in, backing off, firing with your assault cannon. You've got to be really manoeuvrable, really cinematic with this list. The more cinematic you play it, the more effective it is, with each sort of squad representing a little fire team, doing their best to take on the enemies of the Imperium. So on to the next list. This is more of a fun list that makes use of a lot of characters. It's really effective and it looks great on the battlefield. Now the Razorback and the Tactical Marines look like they're just a little tag on, but they're not. They play an essential role in this list. Now what you're going to do is you're going to have your 5 Tat Marines with a Plasma in your Razorback with a Sanguinary Priest. Now this Sanguinary Priest needs to get up the board quickly, and he's going to use the Razorback to do that. You're going to have your Captain in Terminator armor in the sky. Now you get a Captain Terminator armor with Thunderhammer and Stormbolter in your Stark Legend box, and you don't use him that much, but you can convert him. This isn't that model converter, this is a different one from Horus Heresy. You can quickly convert him into a Lightning Claw guy. And I love him as a Lightning Claw guy because he can absolutely tear units apart, characters and infantry. Anything on foot, he is going to mash up, especially if you make him the Warlord and make his Lightning Claws an extra damage, because then he wound most characters on 3s because he's a Blood Angel, re-rolling wounds. He's hitting on 2s and he's a captain, so 1s. And you forget, you use your captain with Thunderhammer so much, and you're used to having that -1 to hit. You forget just how many hits and wounds a captain without a Thunderhammer can put on an enemy unit, and it is absolutely devastating. My regular opponents absolutely hate when this guy deep strikes down 9 inches away from one of their units, or away from the general skirmish going on the battlefield, and that's in big games and small games. He comes down, and I use this guy as a standalone combat unit, but who can bring buffs to the table, and he deep strikes in, and if he doesn't make his assault in the first turn, that doesn't matter, I'm fine. I deep strike him into cover. He's got a 4-up invuln save because he's a captain, and he's really cheap. Just a Captain Terminator on with Lightning Claws is really, really cheap. Lightning Claw pair is just 12 points, and it gives him an extra attack as well. And if you wanted to make him Death Company, then you could have another attack on the charge as well. So you could have those Lightning Claws, 2 damage each, hitting on 2s, wounding on 3s, or possibly 2s depending on the opponent. Re-rolling again, of course, AP -2 because of Lightning Claw, which is great against characters because they usually got an invuln save, so that takes them down to their invuln save, but you get more wounds through because you're sacrificing that extra AP of normal power weapons to get those re-rolls to the wounds. And in character combat, getting a load of attacks through is essential. And if he's your Warlord and he's doing 2 damage because of the Warlord trait, then he is just absolutely brutal. So you've loads of options for customizing that guy, but essentially what's going to happen is you're going to move your Razorback up as far as you can in your first turn, and you're going to move Mephiston with wings up behind it, this captain with wings, with just his jetpack, and the Sanguinary Ancient, who is obviously not a character, is an elite choice, but in a Supreme Command detachment you can take an elite. You can take an infantry squad, and of course in any battle forged army you can take a transport for any infantry squad you've got. So the priest and the tactical marines are going to be in the Razorback, and they scoot forward with the character just behind, and that Razorback just sprays down a little bit of fire, tries and trims the fat, and if they've got a sort of little bit of a screening unit, you can put a few wounds on it. You're not going to finish it off, but you can put a few wounds on it, and sort of start thinking where you're going to make your entrance. Then in the second turn, you're going to fly forward with all your characters, and you're going to jump out your Sanguinary Priest and your Tact Marines, possibly not. If you need to clear a screen, your Tactical Marines can jump out. You've got that Plasma for an almost guaranteed wound on something, almost guaranteed kill because it's got the AP, and you've got plenty of bolters there, well, a few bolters there as well, a handful of bolter shots, so you can kill a couple of infantry off, maybe clear a gap for your characters to go in. But they have got jump packs, and you can jump over units to assault now, so that's great. And then what you do is you also deep strike this guy in. And this guy's a little threat, and he's going to be your second wave almost. He's going to come in, and if this captain gets killed, because everyone hates Thunderhammer captains, if this captain gets killed, it means that Mephi and your Sanguinary Ancient, who's got a Power Fist, are going to still get those reroll 1s to wound from your second captain when he comes into combat. So it's your second wave support character after your first one's got killed off. And if he makes it into combat on the first round, then awesome, he's dicing up for an extra turn, which is great, but it's not essential. Deep strike him somewhere safe but a threat. And then essentially what you're just going to do is you're just going to tear the opponent apart. Mephi will be strength 6 doubled with his sword, because the priest, Sanguinary Priests, not only can they heal people and give these guys D3 wounds back, one of them each turn, which really keeps your characters in. Your opponent will hate this list after they've played it a couple of times, because they'll manage to get one of your characters down almost. If you make this guy and not this guy your warlord, and you give him the Feel No Pain 5 up, and he's got a 3 up invuln because he's got a shield, and Mephi's got 2 up armor and a 5 up Feel No Pain, then he'll almost get one of these guys, almost kill him. You just make your Feel No Pain, keep him on 1 wound. Sanguinary Priest comes along, heals him D3, gets a couple of wounds back probably, and they're just almost back to square one. So it's really brutal. So your priest needs to jump out, hop out, to be within range of supporting these guys. He'll also make the captain +1 strength, everyone +1 strength. That means these guys are all strength 5 doubled with their weapons, so strength 10, and that means they'll be wounding knights on 3s, but because they're blood angels, they get +1 to wound, so it'd be 2s. So this character, and this character can all deal out a horrendous amount of attacks, hitting on generally 2s or 3s with this guy, and this guy, and wounding on 2s against a knight or anything that's strength that's up to toughness 9. This guy can wound anything, something toughness 10, I don't know, off the top of my head. He can wound that guy because he'll be strength 6. Mephi, normally strength 5 +1, strength 6. He's going to tear people apart with the help of that priest. So although you've only got a few characters here, they can just absolutely wail on your opponent. You've only got 4 command points, but you've not got anything really deep striking in and charging. And these guys are all going to move up with the tank together in support, so you don't really need the 3d6 charge either, so you've got those command points to spend, or maybe striking again, or I'd recommend keeping them for rerolls, because you can reroll your invuns once a round or when they're shooting at you, and just keep these characters in the game and keep them fighting. And it is an absolutely brutal list. And once these guys sort of get into the combat and just start tearing stuff apart, once this guy comes in and starts shredding your opponent's counter-assault units or assassinating characters, because it's a great character assassin, your tactical marines can hop back in the Razorback, pull back onto an objective, and sort of just have a little bit of board control there. Remember, a Razorback and a squad of Tact Marines can both hold an objective each. That's 2 objectives held whilst your characters get in and do the dirty work. And this is just a crazy, fun list to use. I cannot tell you how fun this list is to use, with everyone getting the +1 strength, buffing the wounds with the priest. He's just so good in this list. It just makes perfect sense. When you play it, it just makes perfect sense. And obviously you've got your psychic powers with Mephiston as well, so he can be smiting stuff. He can be giving himself up to 3 extra attacks and +3 on his charge and advance rolls if you're giving him various psychic powers and that kind of thing. So he's just altogether a really nasty sort of list with loads of buffs just bouncing off each other, and it's really hard to get rid of those reroll 1s because you've got 2 captains there. And the Sanguinary Ancient obviously giving reroll 1s to wound as well. It's just brutal, what more can I say? So this final list, obviously it's a bit of fun, but it's also actually really powerful. So when your opponent sort of says, right, who's deploying first, you go, you roll off. It doesn't really matter to you because, of course, you will only have one drop with this list. You just put your Land Raider down, be like, that's me deployed. You in there, because the Land Raider can hold 10 models, and that jump packs count for 2. You've got Mephiston in there, plus 5 tactical marines makes 6, and then 2 jetpack characters. You've got your captain, and you've got your Sanguinary ancient there. Now this list, it works in many ways like the other list, but you don't have the priest there, and everyone starts off inside the Land Raider. Now no one at 750 points is going to be cracking that Land Raider open first turn. Even if they bring a knight, that's going to be difficult. I mean, it's doable with a knight, of course, but it's still difficult. He's got an armor 2 up, and he's toughness 8, and he's got a ton of wounds, 16 wounds I believe for a Land Raider. And he's also got 4 last cannons and plenty of Daka there. You've got a Storm Bolter and twin-linked heavy bolters. So that's a load of Daka. And then what you're going to do is you've got power of the machine spirit, so you're going to be hitting on 3s with your heavy weapons, even if you move forward. So you're just going to move your Land Raider forward in the first turn, and then you are going to hop out with everyone in the second turn, or if they come close to you because they're an assault army as well, you can just hop out your Land Raider. And having a Land Raider with your sort of Supreme Command Detachment isn't actually a terrible idea. Now this isn't a Supreme Command Detachment, this is actually only a patrol detachment. I've got an elite, a heavy support, TAC Marines, and then 2 characters. So this is a patrol detachment, so you get 3 command points. You're really struggling for command points there. You probably spend 1 to make this guy have a 5-up feel no pain, warlord trait, black rage, because it gives him extra attacks as well. But you've got your psychic powers, you haven't got the priest, so you're not the extra strength, but you're still going to give people a wallop, and you've got the anti-tank with the 4 last cannons to actually take out any big threats. So if they've got any sort of anti-tank units that could actually target your characters and just blow them out of the water with a lucky hit, if you mess up an invuln save or something like that. Obviously Mephi doesn't have invuln saves, so he's got 2-up armor though, so that keeps him alive with his 5-up invuln. But your Land Raider can just sort of prioritise targets, blow a couple of things out of the water, very hard to stop it. And these guys hop out, they can jump over stuff, they've got a massive reach because they've got 12-inch move, plus 3 from deploying from a vehicle, so they can move 15 inches out of the vehicle and then charge. So you don't have to move the Land Raider forward that much at all, and you can fit 1 Land Raider in cover sometimes, which means that this can be a just ridiculously nasty list. And if they're going to come at you, having the vehicle means you can time your assault well, and timing the assault is a key part of assault army versus assault army. You want to assault them, but you don't want to expose yourself to too brutal a counter assault that you can't recover from. So the Land Raider allows you to just basically pick your time right, and it's very hard to get to your units before you decide you want to get them out of the vehicle. And it's actually just a really fun list to use, and your opponent will have a laugh playing against you. It's not too brutal, and it's just fun to use. The characters combine together nicely. You've got reroll ones to hit, reroll ones to wound in close combat. You've got some psychic powers to give people extra attacks, that kind of thing. Mephi can fly around with his wings if he wants to, or you can go double. You can go smite and the other Blood Angel's damage power. I can't remember what it is. Where you roll off against leadership. I can't remember. Anyway, now there is one other alternative to this list when we're talking about timings, and that is to, of course, now you'll save either 13 points or cost yourself 9 more if you get the multi-melter, but you can, of course, get rid of that guy and get yourself a Redeemer. Now, the Redeemer is not actually a crazy idea in this list because nobody uses Redeemers. Of course they don't. But for just 9 points more than the regular Land Raider, if you take a multi-melter, you'll have twin assault cannon, a multi-melter, and you'll have these twin flamestorm cannons. Now they're D6 automatic hits. They're only range 8, so they're really short range. But they are strength 6, AP -2, and they're 2 damage each. So they really do mess up elite units. Now, if you're playing elite on elite, then they may try and assault your Land Raider. Obviously, the risk with the other Land Raider is it can be assaulted and pinned, and then it can't fire its last cannons. And also, the opponent might want to try and crack you open so he can get to the contents inside and assault you on his terms. But if he wants to assault that Land Raider to crack it open, he's very welcome to, because he's going to take 2d6 automatic hits, strength 6, against any elite units that might try and assault it, or against anything that might try and assault it. Even a Demon Prince at strength 6 will be wounding on 4s. It's got the AP -2, so it takes any characters or elite units down to effectively their invuln save if they have one. It's just a nice balance. Now, I'm not saying the Flamestorm Cannon Redeemer Land Raider is like an optimum choice in any list. It's not necessarily a great choice, but it is a fun choice. And if you've got one in your collection, I have one from when you used to be able to deep strike Land Raiders. If you remember back when you could deep strike Land Raiders, I used to deep strike a Redeemer full of Death Company that didn't have any jetpacks, and I'd just like run at deep strike in, an inch away from my opponent, Flamestorm a couple of units, run out with my Death Company and start chopping stuff up, and it was absolutely nasty. So this list is essentially an excuse for me to use my Redeemer and have a bit of fun with it on occasion, because you've got your combat units and you really can time your assault with this unit, because they're not going to try and crack you out of that Land Raider and assault. You can jump out whenever you want and hack them apart. And of course, it is just pretty funny when your opponent, you're getting your armies out like, oh, what are you going to use for your 750 point list? You just crack out a Redeemer, you've got one drop, it's good, it's hilarious. So anyway, that is 7 or 7.5 if you count these last two lists to do at 750 points. So I hope I've inspired you to try out some 750 point games, start messing around, trying some different combos, and having some fun out there, and having some quick, short, snappy games where you can get some good practice in, practice your tactics, and just essentially master your Blood Angels art, or the art of fighting with Blood Angels. So this has been the Schola Progenium. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.